when we're caring for our clients, are we caring for them really truly at what's best for them? Because what's best for them may be to struggle for a bit. What's best for them may be to have to face the full weight of their pain or their discomfort, you know, or to develop that self-efficacy for themselves, right? Or are we caring for them for ourselves? Are we caring for them for some sense of um, acknowledgement or validation or belonging or attention or status?
Welcome to episode 49 of Give Yourself Some Leeway with me, your host, Eugene Lee. Today I'm joined by Gabriel Shaw, and he shares his experience of being a healthcare worker and what's the difference between caregiving and caretaking. And I really enjoyed this concept because are you coming from a place of, yes, I want to serve others to help them feel better? Or are you coming from a place of, yes, I want to serve others to make myself feel better, for that self-validation? And I think that's something that not a lot of us are fully aware of. And Gabriel also dives into Tai Chi and Qigong, and these are things that I've heard thrown around a lot, but I never fully grasped what they really mean. So I really hope you enjoyed today's conversation with Gabriel, and you can let me know either on eugene.leeway on Instagram, giveyourselfsomeleeway.com, or shoot me an email, eugene@leeway.ie. Thank you, and again, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Gabriel Shaw. Hey Gabriel, it's great to have you here on Give Yourself Some Leeway, and welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Eugene. I'm really happy to be here.
I think one thing that I always like to start with, especially with coaches, and especially when you've experienced burnout, you hit a rock bottom or a turning point. And it's that moment of realization that, I need to change something about my life. I need to grow and develop and start my recovery. And that takes us on a journey of trying different techniques and different practices. And somewhere along the line, some of us get a vision or a spark that we want to serve others. And whether serving others is part of our own personal growth, or we simply just don't want others to experience the pain and what we went through in our burnout.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for you? And why do you do what you do with coaching today?
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. I really appreciate that. My story of burnout is in helping others is maybe I came at it from maybe opposite track of what many people that you talk to discuss, and really what I came from it from was from a tendency toward caregiving, a tendency towards helping others from a really young age. And one thing that I would learn later, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit more in detail later, but one thing that I would learn later on is I was really coming at helping others from a place of trying to get my own needs met. So, and this is very, very common among health practitioners, caregivers of different kinds, is that we kind of come at caring. This is something that Gabriel Mate has talked about, in order to fulfill some need of ours, some sense of significance, some sense of acknowledgement, some sense of love or belonging. And that ends up being a hungry ghost. So that's another, Gabriel Mate term, where we end up constantly trying to help other people in an attempt to fill something of a need in us. And that never gets fulfilled because, of course, nobody can ever really fulfill that need. And then so we end up doing more and more and more and trying to help more and more and more and working more and more and more. And then that's how kind of I came to a place where I was sort of like running on a treadmill is how I usually describe it. I'm running in a treadmill facing a brick wall, not getting anywhere no matter how fast that I ran, and not getting that sense of like ease or fulfillment that I was hoping for. And that was creating a lot of anxiety. That was creating a lot of difficulty in my relationships. There was, some events that occurred, before I did what I do now. I was working as a paramedic on ambulances and in the field, and I had some situations there that really woke me up to the fact that, I need to get some help. I need to get some help for the sake of myself, for the sake of my relationships. And for the sake of, the anxiety and overwhelm that I was facing and the sense of not going anywhere that I was facing. And that's when I really dove into a long journey of personal healing. That personal healing work involved quite a lot of disciplines, from traditional therapy to the use of plant medicines, to the use of men's groups and sharing circles, breath work, things like this. And and then one thing in that healing journey I kind of learned is I learned about the reasons why in my past I was kind of shamed for having my own needs and my own emotions, and never quite got enough attention. I'm from a very large family, never quite got enough attention. And the way I could get attention or validation or love is to care for others, to be an adult really early on, to care for my siblings, to care for my mom. And that caregiving, I just learned that caregiving was a way that I could get that attention, that love, that sense of belonging. And so that's what kind of drove me to do that. And in learning that for myself, I really started to see how we end up caretaking, is what I call it, other people when we're actually caring, especially among health providers and other helpers, helping professions, um, really to get our own needs met. And that's not really for the other person at all, right? And so I see this phenomenon occur a lot, and I really blame this phenomenon partially for the current medical healthcare crisis that we're in, with the healthcare practitioner burnout that we're really seeing, with the case of dependent patients that we're really seeing a lot, lack of self-efficacy among clients and patients, is all related to this. I feel like we can go into more detail about this later, but that's kind of where the process went for me. That's part of the reason why I kind of do what I do now, and helping people with their anxiety, with their overwhelm, with their pain. And another thing I should just mention is that I was a little bit fortunate in my journey where I was exposed to Tai Chi and Qigong from a very early age, in my early teenage years. And, the practice of Tai Chi and Qigong really helped me find a source of center, a source of stability, a source of calm amidst the anxiety, amidst the demand for our focus, or, our attention in all these different areas, amidst different painful situations. And that really helped ground myself through the experience. And, I have a family history, and a lot of siblings and parents and things struggle with anxiety. And even though that's been something I've really faced, it's never been something that I've really diagnosed or had to be medicated for like some of my other family members. And I really credit the Tai Chi and Qigong with really helping me to find that sense of grounding. And so that's really the first thing that I do. And not only that, but heal a lot of injuries. I've been into athletics and a variety of my first degrees in kinesiology. So that's the science of human movement and sport. And so I see a lot of people with injuries, and I see how that's related to their burnout. I see how that's related to their overwhelm. And Tai Chi and Qigong are really something I bring into the coaching that I do to help people find that sense of grounding and stability within their own body and their own energy. And once we can find that sense of grounding and stability within our own body and our own energy, that allows us to do some of the deeper work to uncover some of that source of that anxiety or some source of that burnout, where that might be too uncomfortable to go into before or be present with before. So yeah, I know I've said a lot there, but that's just a little bit about my personal background, my personal story with it.
I'm actually going to touch straight back on that, on the Tai Chi and the Qigong, because it's something that I've heard a lot about, but still don't have a proper understanding of what it really means to practice Tai Chi or Qigong. So could you give, let's say, a beginner's insight into what is Tai Chi and Qigong,
Mhm.
and how does someone, let's say, get into beginning to practice Tai Chi and Qigong?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So I'll say a couple things right at the top. So first of all, most people are probably familiar with seeing people in groups practicing some very slow movements out at the park or something like that. Maybe often older people, and they get this association that, Tai Chi or Qigong are for older people, or maybe they just don't quite understand what's with these slow movements. How could that possibly be helpful? And that's often what most people know about it. Or if they know a little bit more about Tai Chi, maybe they know it's a sequence of movements. And so maybe they think it's just about learning the sequence of movements, but they don't really understand the depth. So yeah, I'm happy to clarify a little bit more about that. And then the other question I often just get asked about is like, what's the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong? And the difference I can just explain to that really briefly is that Qigong is a big umbrella term that just means breath and work. Qi Gong. Gong is the same gong as in Gung Fu, as in just work, basically, or practice. Qi means breath or life force energy. And so it's just this notion of energy or breath work. Specifically, we call Qigong, energy or breath work that comes out of China or Taoist or Buddhist framework is where that comes from, or from the philosophy of Tai Chi, which is really a philosophy of yin and yang. Whereas Tai Chi Chuan is a practice around the philosophy of Tai Chi, which is the philosophy of harmonizing yin and yang. And Tai Chi Chuan is one form of Qigong. So Qigong is a big umbrella term that means a whole variety of forms, animal movements, different breath work, different meditation exercises, really a big, big term. I mean, it's been going on for 5,000 years, so it just encompasses a huge variety of practices. And Tai Chi Chuan is a very specific type of Qigong that is usually passed down through a family lineage and is also a martial art and a healing art. And that's kind of the difference between Tai Chi and Qigong. But either one of these two disciplines, if we talk about Tai Chi or Qigong, sometimes we can talk about them together. Like I said, people see that slow movement, or they see it for older people. They don't necessarily understand what we're doing, because what we're doing is very internal. And that's what we call Tai Chi and Qigong, our internal arts. And what we mean by that is, it's almost like if you saw somebody sitting on a meditation cushion meditating, and you would say, like, oh, I don't know what they're doing. How could that be possibly beneficial for something? You're just sitting there. Well, of course, if you're just looking at them from the outside, they're just sitting there. But internally, there's quite a lot of work going on. And it's very similar. So what we're trying to do in Tai Chi is we're trying to first get to a place of relaxation. So the environment puts stress on us, and we hold that stress as tension in our body. And if we're not able to release that tension or let go of that stress, it's kind of like we're trying to look inward, or we're trying to get in touch with our true essence or our true energy, but we have like a suit of armor on. And how can we get in through that? So the first thing we need to do is find a state of relaxation. And then from that state of relaxation, we want to really get in very, very close contact with what is moving inside. And from a more traditional healing perspective, like in the West, or in a psychotherapy perspective, then we might view this as different, whatever, emotions or things like that. But in Tai Chi and Qigong, we're really just going to talk about it in a somatic sense, in terms of a felt sense of that energy. And what we can do is, once we find that sense of relaxation, that sense of stability, that sense of grounding, then what it allows us to do is it allows us to really get in touch with the energy that's moving inside, and learn to release that energy, or harness that energy, or move through those emotions for healing, and eventually for martial arts as well. So it's a little bit of a taster, I guess, of it. Yeah.
So, just to get a better understanding of Qigong, just from what you said there, it seems like a lot of slow breath work and kind of getting an awareness with yourself. I think my experience with breath work has always been closer to the Wim Hof breathing methods, and they seem very like big deep breaths and exhaling, let's say 30 repetitions and the like. Do you think that like the Wim Hof breathing method is like an aggressive form of Qigong, or is there similarities?
Yeah, yeah. I might say, like I said, usually you might even call Wim Hof one type of Qigong. That would be a little bit of a stretch, because, that's popularized by Wim Hof, and not necessarily, like I said, what's usually associated with, Taoist, Buddhist, or Tai Chi communities out of China. But you could call it that in a loose sense of just saying that is breath work or energy work, right? And in the same way that, so I would say it's sort of an aggressive form, not to say it doesn't have value. It has a lot of value, and it's had a lot of value for me, but there are contraindications for doing Wim Hof breathing. And if you're experiencing anxiety or PTSD, for example, that can be a contraindication. And the reason why it's a contraindication is because when you're doing that type of breath work, you are activating, you're becoming more activating. So if you have anxiety or something like that, you're making that worse, for example. And, somebody who's a Wim Hof expert could say more about that. But um, whereas Tai Chi and Qigong is a softer form of that practice. And that's why it's really good for somebody who's looking for a sense of grounding, for a sense of stability, for a sense of relaxation, for an ability to find some comfort inside their body. And what we can do then, what's helped me do, is once you kind of understand how to find that sense of comfort, relaxation inside your body, inside your own energy, you can take that sense of stability, that sense of grounding into some more activating practices, like, for example, Wim Hof breathing or a variety of other more activating breath work or medicine or meditation practices. And when you can, or cold or hot or whatever, and find that sense of stillness and that grounding within that discomfort. And that's what you're trying to do with Wim Hof anyways. And so what I try to do with people is kind of start with that earlier step of, okay, let's try to find this sense of being comfortable in our bodies and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I think another step is like box breathing. I think that's something that people come across a lot. Is that closer to the Qigong than Wim Hof style breathing?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so box breathing, I first learned that as yin yang breathing, as a type of qigong from yin yang breathing, and you could view the yang being the breath in, because what's happening is you're breathing in is your diaphragm is engaging and you're filling up. And that kind of you're filling up and expansive outward and diaphragm engaging. That's an active process to breathe in. And you could view that as a yang or an active aspect of the practice. And then as you breathe out, you just relax and let go. You empty. And so you could view all of those, that surrender, that emptying, as the yin side of the breathing. Wim Hof would say the same thing. That's what you're doing in Wim Hof breathing as well. I've been trained in Wim Hof breathing, and you're activating and then surrendering, activating and surrendering. So you could view that same thing as yin yang breathing as well. But yeah, so box breathing is a breathing of breathing in and then holding full. In other words, you're holding in that yang state, breathing out and holding empty. In other words, you're holding in that yin state. And that's where I've learned it before, is yin yang breathing. So that's like one form of qigong for sure. But then the other thing to keep in mind that just worth mentioning in this discussion is it's not something that just happens magically. Getting to the sense of grounding or getting the sense of release or releasing tension, releasing stress, releasing trauma from where it's stored in your physical body, or finding comfort in your energy is not something that's just going to happen magically if you just like meditate enough. Mostly uh, at the very beginning and the whole time, really through a Qigong or Tai Chi practice, there are a whole series of conditioning exercises that are the exact opposite of what most people consider conditioning exercises in hardening the body. A lot of people view conditioning in physical training, running or weightlifting or something, for example, that's going to harden the body or make you stronger. And we do the reverse thing, and we try to make you softer. We try to learn how to release and let go by opening the joints, by relaxing the muscles. And there's a whole series of things that you can do for that. People can find samples of this on my website too. If they can find that, coachgabrielshaw.com/Tai Chi, and find a sample of some joint opening exercises that they can do at home for free.
Yeah, I've actually seen that in especially in Asian cultures and different techniques about softening the body as opposed to tensing and strengthening it. And I think it was something along the lines of, if there's going to be a physical impact, that if you tense up, you're more likely to shatter a bone because you're tensing up, and but if you were to fall, and instead of tensing up, that you just went with it,
Mm-hmm.
and that you didn't tense up, that you do less damage.
Right.
So is that similar to what you're describing with Tai Chi?
Exactly the idea, and especially when you start to apply it in a martial arts context, like we do in Tai Chi. Mostly in Tai Chi, we're doing it for health and growth and spiritual practice, but the martial arts element really helps that. It helps us to find some of that strength. It helps us find some of that relaxed strength. Anyways, I digress. Another easy way to see this, if you're not sure what we're talking about, is the easy metaphor would be like a drunk driving accident. right? And if there's somebody who's behind the wheel of a car and they're drunk and they, God forbid, crash into somebody else, which unfortunately does happen all the time, who ends up getting injured or, you know, worse from that incident? Is it more likely to be the intoxicated person, or is it more likely to be the sober person? And I think most of us know it's more likely to be the sober person. And why is that? Well, that's because when the sober person sees the car accident coming, they brace. And in that bracing, we increase the impact. And with the drunk person, because they have taken a substance which takes away their fine motor control, they're not bracing and they're just loose and they're flowing with it. And it's actually, this is not the best example, but it's something that helps you understand the power of like relaxing. But if you think about that same thing in the experience of an interpersonal encounter, okay? So if you and me are meeting, we're discussing, right? Then if I am bracing, I'm coming to this interview and I'm really trying to do something, right? I'm really trying to get across something or make myself look a certain way or please something in you. And even if just the audience kind of pictures themselves doing that, anytime you've been in a social situation where you've really been trying to accomplish something, make the other person like you, perform well, impress somebody, people please somebody, you can even feel, you might be able to feel it now we're talking, there's a certain bracing or contracting that's supposed to start to happen, right? And I can feel that in my body now. Whereas if you just can trust and let go and flow and just kind of see where the conversation goes, I can almost feel right now, there's something in my body that's releasing, there's something that's letting go, and we're able to have a looser, more free, there's less impact of of the conversation or the social encounter. So, hopefully that's something that people can understand, connect with.
Yeah, it's like there's less tension because if you brace, you're getting tense and you can almost feel the tension in the air in that conversation. Whereas if someone comes in and they're in a state of flow, it's easier for that message to come across more naturally and more authentically.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and we can bring this to, something that we'll maybe talk more about in the case of burnout. This will maybe lead us there, is this topic of, self-improvement, which is so dominant in our culture. And so, listen, I exercise, I run, I'm training for a race right now, so I don't want to give people the impression that physical training in these other ways is bad for them. It can be quite healthy, but also having worked in the fitness industry, in the health industry for many, many years, what I can also attest to is that most people are coming to these exercises, running, weightlifting, whatever, as a means to change who they are, as a means to change something about themselves that they don't like, something they're not accepting, engage in some self-improvement. Um, and often what ends up happening is they're almost like putting on a mask or they're trying to like armor themselves against something. Okay. This is by no means everyone that's coming to these activities. That certainly people have done their own inner work and or are coming at these from a different standpoint or can come to these and learn these lessons through these physical disciplines. So I'm not saying this is everybody, but a lot of people are coming at it for some lack of self-esteem, some quest for self-improvement, some lack of accepting something. And what they're doing is they tend to like just armor themselves up more, get more and more tense, try to bury some part of themselves that they don't like. And instead of trying to find a way to accept that part of themselves, and from that acceptance comes some ease. And so there's just kind of two ways to go about doing it, a harder way or a softer way. And so that's what we're talking about right now is the softer way. But yeah.
So, do you feel that, let's say, when it comes to self improvement, I feel that people who are, let's say, high achievers or overachievers, that they feel so driven by self improvement, it's kind of an element of imposter syndrome as well. That they feel they have to keep on striving for how can I improve myself more? How can I get better at this? How can and they're never good enough. Do you feel
Yeah.
like that plays a part in imposter syndrome or in burnout? even in caregiving as well.
Yeah, big time. Because when you started engaging in this self-improvement, and I did this too. Like this was so classically me on the on the self-improvement train, right? And for me, it came through more like health or spiritual growth or whatever, transcendence, these kind of highfalutin things, and less through like some people find it more through their career or something like that, right? Um, but I'll tell you a short story about me is that one time I had this ex-girlfriend for many, many years. We lived together. We kind of thought this was going to be the one, but anyways, it didn't end up working out. But I remember one time, so her and I always kind of had this argument about like, she was kind of always trying to say like, I'm fine with who I am, basically. Like, just and stop trying to improve me all the time or stop trying to get me on the self-improvement train all the time. And I was kind of like always on this ever-ending source of self-improvement and in a way kind of feeling like she was lacking because she was not on this train with me and was trying to always encourage her along that path of self-improvement. And I think many people can identify with this. And I remember one time she got a gift from another close friend of ours who knew us pretty well, and the gift was like this plaque that like went on the wall, and it said, among friends, everyone has that person that always just encourages them to be better and motivates them to improve. And I just want to say thank you so much for never being that asshole. And it's just like, okay, I got that message. Obviously, that resonated with something that me that she would give this. And there is something about that. You can kind of feel that, right? And I think a lot of people felt that for me. A lot of my friends and in my, my obviously my partner and me and my family kind of felt this sense that I was always trying to improve them. I was always trying to aim towards some potential. I mean, and it's true now. I still struggle with that now and have to kind of always check myself. But that self-improvement culture, you were using imposter syndrome, and that's a part of it. But another way to look at it is it comes from a place of inadequacy. You are inadequate. You are not enough. And so therefore you must be better. And so when we approach, it's kind of this paradoxical thing. In Tai Chi, we love paradox. There's this paradoxical thing that happens when we approach ourselves with a want to change something, with a striving, with a sense of inadequacy. People might be able to feel the tension in their body right now as I'm kind of naming this stuff. When we approach that, we have something tenses, something closes, something holds on, and we actually prevent the change that we're trying to achieve because we're not accepting where we are. We're not accepting the truth of the situation. We're not loving ourselves. But when we actually can come from a place of acceptance and being with what is and loving ourselves, then we find that place relaxes. I can feel it happening in me right now as I'm talking to you. And as that place in our body relaxes, the change starts to occur spontaneously. We become open to new insights. We can start taking that first step instead of looking too far in the future. And we can really approach it from where we're at. And then the change starts to, arise on its own. And this sense of inadequacy and self-improvement really is a cultural phenomenon in a culture we have, especially out here in the far west, maybe where you live as well, about hero worship, needing to be the person who saves the day, needing to go at it by yourself. And this is very an immature culture, is what I would say. And that leads a lot to burnout. You can see if you always need to be better, if you always need to be improving, if you're never enough, if you're always coming against from a sense of inadequacy, if you need to go at it alone. We have those stories of Batman. He goes to work all day and then he fights crime all night and then he's broken and beaten, but he still doesn't need help. And the next day he goes back to the high work or whatever. And these are the people that we're looking up to and saying, I want to be like that. Right. And you could see why that could lead us to burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, I love using the Batman example. I've actually found a lot of superhero examples lately on the podcast. There's been Superman, now Batman, there's been Super Mario, and it's great that we can look at these are our idols. And it's like these are the ones that we look up to, and we forget that they have their flaws as well. They have their weaknesses.
Mhm.
I think again, when it comes to this self-improvement, and as you said, that it's in our culture, as you said, the superhero and the soloist as well, the person who wants to get everything done themselves. These are two traits, very common traits of imposter syndrome. It's when you don't want anyone else to get involved. It's like, no, I can do this. I can do this myself, and you're trying to prove your self worth. You're actually by not accepting yourself and not accepting that you're only human. And yes, you have weaknesses, you have flaws, and that you need help on some tasks. And that's again what leads to burnout, because you're trying to outpace yourself to
Yeah.
achieve.
Yeah. And if I could just riff on something you said there, which is what you said is you're only human. And if I would just like pause and like ponder that for a little bit, I think that a lot of us have this notion or we've heard this thought for you can't do it all yourself, you're only human. What I would say is, what if we approach that with a different attitude and say, no, you're human. And part of being human is that you are a part of humanity. And what a beautiful thing can happen when we start to admit our own shortcomings, when we start to admit our own weaknesses, when we start to admit our own pain, our own vulnerability, what happens when that we let go of that soloist, and then all of a sudden we feel this radical dependence we have, or an interdependence on others in our communities. And that interdependence comes with a sense of connection. And it's really that source of connection that's so lacking in our world, and what so many people are seeking. And it's directly, but you don't get there through the soloist self-improvement method. You get there by letting go of that and admitting your own vulnerabilities, right?
Yeah, I think that was good correction on your part. So I do commend you for that. That's something that I have been trying to change myself. That I've been using the words only and just. And it's the power of those words that using the wrong words, of course, you're creating a blueprint for how your brain operates. So thank you for spotting that on me. I'm going to keep a better check on my use of only. But yeah, again, another thing you touched on there about being human is that for thousands of years, what set humans apart and put us at the top of the food chain was the fact that we work in tribes and we work as part of a team. We work exponentially better as part of a team within our role. And
Mhm.
the idea of a soloist, especially in modern times, where they're like, I can get everything done myself. I don't need the team, or especially in managers when they're like, I can do this myself. I don't want to be seen as weak by my team, by my staff. So I don't want to be delegating duties to them if I know I should be able to do it better than them, rather
Mhm.
than recognizing the team for their strengths and their weaknesses and delegating them to their strengths and being like,
Mhm.
okay, I know that I could do 100% of this project, but I'll be absolutely wrecked by the end of it and exhausted. And if I do this for project A, I definitely won't have the capacity for project B. Or I could assign 10 of my team members to take on elements of this project, and I can compile it at the end. And hey, we'll all be ready to and be more skilled and more empowered to take on project B.
Yeah, exactly. In Project C and D, or a bigger project, and I want to, share with folks and just mention for the sake of this conversation that this is aspirational for me too, and as somebody who just runs my own business as a solopreneur, I tend to do everything in my business for myself, and I'm taking a little inspiration from this talk. Hey, I need to take my own Kool-Aid and find some ways to delegate and bring on support and bring on help as well. So just so we all are swimming in this water. including myself, and so yeah, I'm appreciating this conversation too for helping inspire me to find some delegation, find some support too.
That's brilliant. That's one thing I do love about these conversations is that it's not always just about giving value to the listeners. We always get value ourselves, just like you correcting me on the word only. It's
Yeah.
again something, but just putting it back in the back of my mind, to be more careful with my use of words because again, that's how you create your brain's blueprint. Um, Another thing we just touched on there, especially when it came to self improvement and the whole acceptance versus self improvement concept, is that it's kind of imbued within us in our culture, whether that's in society or in the workplace, that we're constantly striving for growth and progress. So maybe that's something that instills within us that we need to constantly progress in our careers, in our personal lives, and it's funny as you said with your story with your previous partner about how you were almost trying to improve them or get them on the same self improvement journey. But in your defense, especially when I was on a similar self improvement journey, when I started working out more and I started getting healthier, I was much more positive, and people could see that in me as well. That there was kind of like a light shining around me, and they were like, "Oh, I wish I had your energy and your discipline to be getting up at 4 a.m. and work out." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love if you want to join me, great." And they're like, "Oh no, that's crazy talk.
Hmm.
I want your results. I just don't want to do the input. I
Yeah.
don't want to do the hard work." And I'd be like, "No, come join me." I was like, I'd love if someone wanted to join in on it because I'm full of endorphins from all this exercise. And it's again in your best effort to help them experience what you're experiencing. They're probably just getting annoyed because they're kind of envious of the results you're getting, but they don't want the discomfort of all the hard work and the time that goes into learning those techniques and putting in the action and the effort.
So this is now getting us back to caretaking a little bit because the critical distinction with the story that you just told is that person coming to you and saying, "Hey, I would like to shine like you're shining. How can I do that?" Which is completely different from, "I want to fix you so that I can feel better about where you're at and where our relationship is at or whatever." And many of us experience with this with our partners, and I know that's very, very common with our partners, but like I said, it's very, very it's less talked about or less known in the helping professions where, I need a result for my client so that I can feel better about myself as a coach, for example. And that's not really going to do actually much to actually honestly help them. And the best thing that we can do for those people is to just help them see where they are at and accept where they are at. And that partially means accepting what are those hurdles for them that keep them. Okay, hey, listen, if you don't want to get up at 4 in the morning to exercise, then you don't have to. What's the easy time? What's the easy time that feels good to work for you, right? That's on a very practical level, or maybe on a more deeper level, you might kind of ask like, okay, what kind of gets triggered in you when you think about exercising? What does it feel like? What's the feeling inside that's preventing you from doing that? And that's usually more of how I coach is let's accept all your parts, you know. Yeah.
Yeah, so the element of, let's say, them coming to you and saying, I want to shine the way you're shining and have that same energy and that same optimism when it comes to exercising and staying healthy. And them coming to me and looking for the help is and let's say me giving the advice, hey, you can try it out this way, it's caregiving. But what would be caretaking in that situation?
Yeah, so caretaking simply put is, let me see if I can maybe say this a little differently. In the case of my partner, let's say, right?
Okay.
I have to ask myself, am I trying to get her to improve herself for her truly, or am I trying to do it for me? Is there something that's going to make me feel better if she's doing it, or something that's going to appease me more? Or for helping professionals that are listening or caregivers, when we're caring for our clients, are we caring for them really truly at what's best for them? Because what's best for them may be to struggle for a bit. What's best for them may be to have to face the full weight of their pain or their discomfort, you know, or to develop that self-efficacy for themselves, right? Or are we caring for them for ourselves? Are we caring for them for some sense of um, acknowledgement or validation or belonging or attention or status, right? And I realize this is very hard to look at for people, and that's why it's not talked about so much in the helping professions. But if I'm caring for a client out of some attempt to get one of my needs fulfilled, then who am I really doing it for? So if I'm really doing it for me, then that's really caretaking, and it's not really giving.
Yeah, it's less of a selfless act of wanting them to feel better as themselves rather than wanting them to feel better so that they can be more like you.
Exactly. Or not necessarily so they can be more like me, but so that I can feel something, so that I can feel like I'm worthy. I can feel worthy as a coach. I can feel validated that my method works, or I can just feel um, some sense of acceptance, right? It's not so much they can be like me, it's just more so that I can, have some kind of feeling myself, some kind of ego boost. And if I can make this a different, so, my focus is on caregivers, but I can also make this the same thing in business, right? Many, many businesses struggle because they are trying to create something for them. They're trying to create a business for them. They have an idea that they're trying to put out in the world, right? And Tony Robbins says, fall in love with your clients, not your product. And so I think really good business advice, not that I'm trying to give anybody here business advice, but I think anybody here can see when you're actually seeing a struggle that's actually people are actually facing, and then you go out to actually solve that, and you can then ask your clients, how can I do better? How can I do better to solve this problem for you? Like, I care about this and I want you to not have to struggle with this, and I see how common this is. What can I do better to help you with this? And then they tell you, and then you reiterate and change what you're doing in order to answer that need. That's gonna result in better business. That's always gonna result in better business than come to me for my thing that I'm trying to do for me because I'm creating something and I want to have a business, which is unfortunately also common, you know?
Yeah, it's like it's almost just self-validation at the end of the day that you're trying to
Perfect.
get people to come to you and to get your service so that you can feel like, okay, I've made it. My business has made it. I am successful, rather
That's
than
right.
spreading your service or sharing your product being, I'm helping people. This is a good place to be. Like, people are enjoying my product, or people are finding this thing really, really helpful in their lives. And it, instead of falling back on, this is making a difference in people's lives, I feel good about myself. This is and coming from a place of, yeah, again, it just comes back to that you don't feel like you're enough unless your business is succeeding. And
Well
it's
said.
kind of you're looking for that external validation all the time, and rather than just giving value and being happy that I'm providing value in someone's life, I'm creating an impact, and that doesn't affect how I feel as a person. And if if I can just help someone else out, it doesn't affect how I feel about myself. I'm not a success or a failure whether I help someone or not. And yeah, it's just coming from a better place. And in realizing that, again, in accepting yourself for being human, you actually help and have a greater impact on others, because you're not coming from a higher place. You're not coming from feeling like you're coming from a lower place than everyone else and that you need to show up differently in order to create a difference in their lives. You're just coming as yourself. You're being authentic to your true self and showing up as yourself and providing value from just a human to human level. And yeah, just creating that connection, giving that value. And they're definitely going off down a tangent here, or on a loop. It's
Yeah,
creating that value.
that's
Yeah,
really well said. Yeah, that's all really well said. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
awesome. So, Gabriel, especially your style of coaching, and when it comes to Tai Chi and Qigong, if people are interested in finding out more, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you, get in touch with you? Maybe your social media, or your website. What's the best way for them to get in touch?
Sure. Yeah, people can find me on really all the social media platforms if they just search up Coach Gabriel Shaw, and they'll find me on the social media platforms that way. Uh, check out everything I'm doing and my coaching and everything like that on my website, coachgabrielshaw.com. If people are, looking for some help with this, if they're struggling with burnout, or pain or burnout and pain that are related to one another, I'm happy to get on a call with folks and to decide if that's a good fit or help them find the next place for them. Again, they can just find that on my website, coachgabrielshaw.com. If they go on my website, they want to know more about Tai Chi Qigong, there's a page. They just click on the Tai Chi tab on my website. There's a free 30-minute lesson they can do there to start opening their joints, like we talked about earlier. That's there for free. I also have like a 12-week online course for Tai Chi that's on my website as well. Again, that's all over at coachgabrielshaw.com. There's a newer project that I've started that's specifically to help caregivers, health professionals who really want to find more ease and find greater impact. And that can be found at liberatedpractitioner.com. And if you want to get involved with that project, the best thing to do is to sign up for our emails where, I'm helping just share a lot of the ideas I've talked about and also gathering ideas from other health professionals who have been on a similar journey and sharing those with folks in just, bite-sized chunks, a couple times a month. So if you have caregivers listening, liberatedpractitioner.com.
That's awesome, Gabriel. And thank you again for your time on the show.
Yeah. Thanks, Eugene. Really been a pleasure and really been a beautiful discussion. So thanks for the beautiful space.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, could you take a moment to leave a 5-star rating on Spotify, because it really helps to improve the rating of the show so that it's more easily found by others who might enjoy the show just as much as you. And maybe take a moment to share with family, friends, or a loved one, because what better way to help break the stigma around mental health than to have that conversation with those closest to us. As always, reach out to me at giveyourselfsomeleeway.com, on social media, eugene.leeway, or shoot me an email, eugene@leeway.ie, because even though Give Yourself Some Leeway is like an outlet for me, I also want to give the highest value to you, my listeners. So I really depend on your feedback. Let me know what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to hear more about. So until I hear from you, take care of yourself. Maybe have a glass of water, crack a smile, and think of a way to prioritize your own self-care. So until next time, take care.